Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Enlightened Life. Have you ever had a moment, one single decision that changed the entire course of your life? Maybe it was a relationship you walked away from, a career you left behind, or a moment when you finally chose yourself over everything else. You know, those moments shape us, they wake us up, and sometimes they open the door to something we never expected. Today on the show, we're talking about transformation, the kind that shakes you to your core and rebuilds you to the person you are always meant to be. And my guest, Catherine Crestani, knows this journey intimately. She walked away from a marriage that no longer served her. She sold a company to free herself from a toxic partnership. And after years of chronic stress, adrenal fatigue, and insomnia, she set out on a path of deep healing, one that led her to rediscover her spirituality, unlock extraordinary gifts, and embrace a whole new way of living. Now, Catherine helps others do the same. She works in the realm of spiritual epigenetics, and we're going to talk about that. It's the ability to repair and restore DNA on a quantum level while releasing the energy blocks that keep us stuck. She's a speaker, a healer, and an intuitive author, channeling books that bring wisdom, empowerment, and even the magic of trees. And you are not going to want to miss that, the magic of trees, into the conversation. In today's episode, we'll explore what it truly means to choose yourself and how spirituality and science are beginning to align and how we can all tap into our own power to heal, grow, and transform. So if you're ready for a conversation that just might change the way you see your life and what's possible for you, stick around. Let's dive in. Hello, Catherine. Welcome from Australia. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, Scott. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm so glad we were able to put this together because it is morning for you where you are. What time is it there now in Australia?
9:30 a.m. currently.
9:30 a.m. and we're 6:30 on the day before.
Yeah. So
6:30.
hello from the future.
Hello from the future. Yes, I always knew that was possible. So I'm so glad you're here. You know, it's funny because we chatted for a little bit before we actually did the show. We chatted a couple of weeks ago, and it was really just some of the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight is just, I think, so totally cool. But I'd like to go back just a little bit and talk about that moment when you realized that things had to change and how you found the courage to take that first step.
It definitely is courage, Scott, definitely. So I guess there were a few pivotal moments in my life that made me really reflect on who I was. And the very first catalyst was the one where I actually led to me leaving my first husband. So it was just as simple as I was out to dinner with some high school friends, and I used to make mixtapes for people, like, showing my age here, but I used to get, CDs and download music, and I do it for all my friends. And then I just stopped doing that. I stopped loving the music that I loved and started to disconnect from myself, but not realizing I was doing it because it takes years before you actually realize there's nothing left of you.
Yeah.
And I was getting driven home by my friend, and he was playing all this music for me, and I didn't know any of it. And he's like, "Who are you?" And I went, "Oh." Like, just that one question, like, he's like, "I don't know who you are anymore. Who are you?" And for me, it was just this soul shaking question. It was so innocent for him. He was just,
Mhm.
saying, like, "I don't know, who's this person that you've become?" And I really didn't. And I started unpacking all these things, and I realized how numb I was in my relationship and how much I had made my life about fixing other people and making sure everyone else was happy, but forgot about myself and that whole journey. So then when I stepped out of that marriage, which it wasn't that quick from that moment, but it did, lead up to that, and realizing, I went to courses and I did all these things. And it was one, I was with a counselor because a friend said, he was helping us, and he goes, "I'm too close to this. You need to talk to someone independent." And she went to me, "All right, can you imagine yourself in this relationship in 10 years?" And I'm like, "Nah, She goes, in 5 years? I said, no, that's just a waste of time. Like I want to have family, all these things. And she goes, what about 1 year? And I'm like, she goes, what if I said to you, you could leave right now? And I just went, oh, like I just needed someone to tell me it was okay to do that, because having that support and that, someone else external to tell you you're not crazy and that you do need to get out of that relationship can be really empowering in itself, because then you need to find the courage to go through with that, So it wasn't long after that that I made the decision to leave my marriage. And it was, for a breakup, it was quite harmonious, I have to say. There were some little things, but it was really beautiful, because then not long after that, I actually met my husband now, and completely different. I wasn't looking. I definitely was happy being single in my 20s. I was living my best life. I had money, no parents. I grew up in a very strict Italian household, so I had no parents, And then once I was happy in my personal relationship, then the highlight of my business partnership was there. And it took even my husband to say, this is going on. And then I chose to step away from that and build my own company, only to create a toxic culture that everything revolved around me. There was no real leadership, as in lifting other people up. It was like, I'm here, everyone else has to come to me. And it wasn't that I felt I was a bad boss, but at the same time, I made myself so, everyone had to depend on me so much. I was working, 24/7. Like I would wake up in the middle of the night and send emails, because I learned about delayed send. It's the worst thing for an insomniac, because you can hide, you can hide who you are. And it was just so consuming. And in the midst of that, I started my spiritual awakening. And it was my dark night of the soul was actually that company falling apart. So I had 3 staff leave, and I was on the floor in a ball, because it was really hard to find good staff. It was really hard to find, because I was in allied health. It's really hard to find in Australia. It's really hard to find good staff that stay as well. So I was on the ball, crying, because I'm there trying to step back, and find more ways to come back to myself and look after my health, because I was suffering from chronic stress, adrenal fatigue, burnout, panic attacks, all the fun things that come with that, and then this is happening. I'm like, why? And then a month later, another 3 leave. Like I was always in threes. And then I went, oh my goodness, but it didn't feel as bad. And then a month later, another 3 left. And I went, okay, they're not meant to be in my life anymore. And then I knew it was done. And that was kind of the beginning to the end of that. I'm like, no, I definitely need to sell the company. It's not serving me anymore. And I remember going up to my guides and meditating afterwards, making this decision. And they're there going, finally, you got there,
Yeah. Yeah.
the slow clap. And it was, that turning point too. But then I subconsciously didn't believe I was worthy of the money that I sold the business for. So, still, my husband and I don't live frugally. And to this day, we still don't understand fully where it all went. And all of a sudden, then I was living paycheck to paycheck. So then I had to face my worst story. And it was only, I'd broken up social media and all this stuff. And it was finally just following my intuition, doing lots of free things. So if anyone's thinking, how can I upskill myself? There's so much free stuff. You just got to be really resourceful and, see what you can get. But that's how I met my coach at the same time. And I got up in the middle of the night to join his coaching masterclass. And I'd worked with him a few times, but I was like, I really want to work with this man. He gets me, he's on my level, he's very spiritually aligned. And I get up in the middle of the night, because he's in Malaysia, and sit in this masterclass at 11 o'clock at night. And I go to bed at 8:30. So I'm just like, yeah, okay, I'm here. And, and then he makes this offer at the end. And it was exactly what we had in our bank account. And, I was like, I need to say yes. And then I did that. And then I went into my worth again and was like, oh, what's my husband going to say? I just put our last, bit of money into this. And then he was awake when I came to bed. And I said, he goes, how did it go? And I said, I hope it's okay. I did this. And he goes, I hope you signed up. And I was like, I did. Thank you. Because he knew I really wanted this support. And it was from on that it wasn't really anything he did, but it was more all the coaching and all the emotional clearing and everything. Because when you have that support, letting someone else know you can do things, and that's the biggest thing for anyone listening, I feel you need to find the right people and put yourself around the right people, because if you
Yes.
don't have support around you, nothing's going to change in your life, nothing's going to shift, and nothing's going to allow you the space to then grow and create what you need to create, so that it really empowers your soul and drives it through. So, and it was through that journey working with him, and I still work with him, and he kicks my butt, but in a supportive way. And he's also really good at pulling me back, because recently I was like, I'm like, I think anyone that is sensitive felt the March madness, right? Especially this last month has been insane energies. And I'm like, I can't do all of this because I have all these things I want to do. And he's like, no, you can't do all of that. You need to pick one thing and focus on it, and then make everything around that. And I was like, oh, thank you. But if I didn't have that support, I would just stay in that story of feeling I needed to do everything, and then get pulled back into that old toxic mindset, which is what I don't want. So they were essentially where I am now today. And
Oh.
then because I created that space and I left the company, then I could tap more into my creative things. And that's where the writing started to bloom from.
Had you always been spiritual? I know you said you meditated, but
No, so I was when I was a child. It was only through unpacking things. I always had the imaginary friend,
Mhm.
um, and it was only when I started to unpack things that I realized I was talking to spirits a lot, including my great grandfather who had passed.
Mhm.
He was kind of a guide for a little bit. He was keeping the seat warm, which is really beautiful for my great grandmother, because we were always really close. So she's one of my main spirit guides. And but it wasn't until about, I think it was 2020, it was the midst of COVID, and then I just followed my gut, because I always felt really unfulfilled. Like there was like I worked with children. I was a speech language pathologist, supporting them on their communication journey. And everyone's like, your job must be so fulfilling. You get to help children speak. I'm like, yeah, it's good, but it never was feeling that soul nudge that I had. And it was through that, it was through my naturopath, actually. I noticed that his partner had this offering. And I said, oh, what's Carly doing? And he goes, I really think you should book in with her. And I said, okay. So I did. And then she started channeling for me, and we unpacked all my gifts through that. And I went through quite a rapid awakening. So in like the period of a year, I went from not meditating, not being able to connect with anything at all, to all of a sudden having like past relatives give me messages for my family, to being able to feel people's pain and actually understanding that's what I'd been doing my whole life. I just didn't know how to categorize that, to being able to channel and get these intuitive messages coming through. And it's still evolving, and it keeps evolving. And I love just you think you know what you're doing, and then spirit likes to throw something else in front of you,
Yeah.
right? And go, actually, no, go this path.
Yeah. So, and I'm curious about this because you talk about spiritual epigenetics. Can you
Mm.
explain that? What is it? Where did you even find that out?
This is a story in itself. So, I was, it was a crazy time last year. So, this only happened last year. So, about a year, maybe nearly 2 years ago, I went for my first breathwork session, and it was really intense. Like I had psychic surgery, I had all these devices pulled off me, and I felt all the pain. I relived my past life deaths to reclaim the power in that. It was really traumatic, but in a good way. Like it needed to happen. And it took me a year before I went back again. So it was about August last year. And I went, okay, well, we've done the bad stuff. So, worst case, I do this breath work again, and it will be like that. And I got that expectation, but hopefully, I'll have the joyful experience that other people have. And I kept feeling that I had to go to this past life, that I knew I worked a lot in the mystery schools in Alexandria, and I knew there was something there I needed to learn. And I was going to book in with a friend for a past life regression session. And then I just heard, just wait. So I'm going into this breath work, doing the breathing thing. And then I start to see pyramids in my periphery. And I'm like,
Right.
I'm going on a past life regression myself. This is exciting. And I walk into this temple, and one of the elders just came up and hit my third eye and went, "Hey, here's this information you've been missing. You can actually work with the DNA in the quantum realm." And I was like, "What?" And all of a sudden, I just knew how to do it. And then in that past life regression, I was then taken with Mother Earth, and it was so beautiful because I'm there with Mother Earth repairing the DNA at that of the earth and helping to realign it and get rid of all the things that misalign. So it was really beautiful. And then in that too, my husband was going through a lot of health things and I couldn't help him. And as a intuitive healer, it was really hard. And I didn't understand why. I just kept getting a block saying, "No, you can't work with him. No, you can't work with him." And he was going through his own journey at that. So he, at that time, had just had his spirituality turned back on because he completely shut down that aspect, which is why I couldn't work with him. Makes perfect sense now.
Mhm.
And they said, you can, in this past life, in this meditation, breath work, whatever you experience, they said, you can work with him again and you need to use this DNA thing on him. And I was like, oh, okay. So I messaged this practitioner he was working with, and she works with Rife frequencies, so energy frequencies. And I said, oh, apparently I can do this now. How can I help? And she said, all right, can you look at this, this, and this, and this? I was like, okay. So I did, and I'm there playing with his DNA. And it was like, if anyone's seen Minority Report with Tom Cruise, you know how he's like moving all the things around? That's how I feel like. I'm just like they're going, this like with DNA, mind you. So it's really weird and fun. And I said, okay, this is what I've done. And I sent her the message because if you don't speak it or put it into this realm, it doesn't anchor. And she said, I don't know what effing magic you did, but you've got rid of this. This has come down. You only need to do this, this, and this, and this. She goes, just keep working on it. And I was like, wow, okay. Like, because it's so rare to get that validation and to
Yeah.
get that feedback especially from a frequency machine. And I was like, wow, this is really, really cool. So then when I started working with my coaching clients, I could see what was anchoring in that stops their DNA. So we all have this beautiful divine blueprint that we're given. But from the moment we're born, if not before that, it starts to get impacted upon between like generational impact and healing and beliefs and cultures,
Mhm.
etc., etc. And when you have all these, for me, it looks like a cord and they hook into the DNA and they stop it from spinning. So when it's in this beautiful enlightened thing, for me, it looks like a Christmas tree. So it like lights up with little bits of light and
Mhm.
it spins. And these cords anchor it in so it can't let go. And it's usually not my role. I can cut like little things that don't matter. But if it's a life lesson for that person, this is where like ethics really come in with spirituality. I cannot cut it. I work with the person, empower them to release it if they're ready and they want to do it themselves. So then once they get rid of that anchor, then I can see what's going on. And sometimes I can splice out corrupt genes and things like that so that they can then go on their recovery path. So it's magical and very cool. And yeah.
Tell me what you can heal with that. What someone comes to you, what is it that they're coming to you with?
Usually the clients I get, because they're a reflection of me, are things that are stopping them from expressing. Oh, actually, it's really cool because I get shown their highest timeline. So if they're like trying to start a business or working towards something or like have relationship difficulties, I get shown what their life can look like if they make certain choices. I can't tell them that all the time, but what I can do is guide them, hey, these are the things we need to shift. So often when I work with clients, that is what we shift. And sometimes it will be, okay, well, you can't let go of this physical ailment. Let's see if there's a genetic component and we can help, enhance that in the DNA to enhance the healing. So in my husband's case, it was, I think there was a dormant herpes gene that was expressing in him. So we got rid of that. And then
Really?
he also had, yeah.
Is it now? I mean, and look, like I'm all into this woo-woo stuff. I mean, I do this myself, not that specifically, but How do you know you got rid of it? Because I can hear people in the back. You're already saying,
Yeah.
does she know
Well,
that?
that well,
What's
that one I knew because it was like coming up on the Rife machine. So after I shifted it, then it wasn't coming up on the Rife machine anymore. So that was really lucky that I could have that reinforcement but I don't go around claiming I can do all these things because in the end, your soul has to be ready to heal or shift whatever you need. So as much as I can, when I've worked with clients and I've helped relieve infections and shift things because it wasn't meant to be there in the first place. Like it's
yeah.
just like, or, they're ready to be done with it. So I don't claim I can heal or cure things, I guess, because in the end, it comes down to what your body wants and what you can do. Merely, I can release and take away the things that might be energetically stopping you from doing that. But again, you have to be ready. And that's always the caveat with the things like you have to be ready and it has to be, and I met even a few weeks ago, I met this beautiful woman and she said she knew the cancer was coming because she's quite a great channeler. But she said, I had to still go through that experience because I had to learn where I was, ignoring parts of my life and how it was expressing in myself. And, our body is such a messenger when we ignore things and push things down and ignore our emotions that then it expresses in the physical. And we don't want it to get to that point because when it gets to that point, you're in tragedy. Because, if you keep ignoring, you have ignored your emotions so much that your body is now expressing in these, crazy whatever it might be, autoimmune it might be. For me, it was that threat of autoimmune from being in chronic stress for that long that really made me wake up and go, wow, I'm glad I made the decision to change my life because I was on the cusp of getting to that point. And it's again, when you ignore those emotions and you push them down, then that's when the body goes into that dis-ease. And that's with anything, like we all have cancer cells in our body, but it's how we treat the emotions that fuel that can lead to the expression of it or not. So, and also what we put in our body. So you've got to remember all these factors. And then, so by the time clients come to me, I'm like, okay, well, these are the steps you can take. And it might end up like this. But again, we're human beings. We always have free will. We always have the divine will. We can choose what we want to do and how we want to move through in our life. And that is truly what impacts it. So I'm just like any other, light worker holding space because in the end, that's what we do. And I'm just blessed. I can see, hey, this is impacting your expression of yourself in the divine realm by this. And we can work on that if you want to. And I've had clients go, I don't know if I'm ready to cut that yet, especially if they're leaving a long-term relationship. I'm like, okay, well, what are you holding on to? And that's where I can guide them into, are you holding on to the vision that never happened or that's never going to happen? Often dreams, right? For me, I went through this recently. So we built this amazing house and we had this dream we'd stay here forever. And then we realized, actually, no, it's not serving us anymore. We need to let go of that dream. And you have to grieve that and you have to cut the cords that are attached to that because energetically you're tied to this timeline that you've created for yourself. And sometimes we need to shift that. And so, especially if you're coming out of like a long term marriage and, like a long or relationship or a dream or something like that, you still have to have that mourning and that grief period to still move forward and be ready enough to detach that cord. And if you're not ready, then you're not ready. And it will just stay there till you are.
Do
Or
you
it will
work
just stay there
with
forever.
do you work with behavioral things or is it all physical? I mean, you talk about coming out of marriage and stuff. That's sort of a behavioral component. But it's not all. When we talk about DNA, we think of DNA in terms of physical, disease,
Yeah, no.
physical. But
Because yeah, and our DNA is impacted by our mindset and our energy as well. Exactly what you were saying, Scott, because, if we don't think we're worthy, then these different energy systems, especially worthiness comes from that sacral and solar plexus. So if you haven't got that worthiness, then that can lead to gut issues and that can lead to imbalances in how you digest food and all those sorts of things. And then that in turn can impact your DNA. And there's so many cool studies now with epigenetics coming out of, I think there was a really good one out of Harvard. I had like this infographic, you know, and it's like that classic case of when you hear where twins get separated. So
Mhm.
these have the same, you know, genetic DNA, but then they get split up at birth. And instead of having the same expressions, they don't. They might look completely different as well, because the environment that we're in actually impacts how our genes express. You know, and it's the same with, you know, they always talk about, you know, are you from a low socioeconomic area? You know, what do your parents do? All those things, because it does factor into how your genes express. Your culture that you grow up in impacts how your genes express. You know, so in terms of behaviors, yeah, it does impact your DNA, because there's also that, you know, belief amongst the science community of the junk DNA, because they don't know what it is, right? Where it's actually, no, there's a lot of um, spiritual energy in there, like divine blueprints encoded in that junk DNA, that is just kind of ignored because they don't know what it is and they can't explain it. So it's amazing, because I feel the science will catch up to that again at some point, because that's what always happens, right? In the
Right.
woo community, we'll put out these ideas and then they'll go, huh, maybe. And then they'll, you know, and then 20 years later, they'll start to, like grounding, for
Yeah.
example. There's so much evidence about grounding working now, but it used to be, oh, those hippies are hugging the tree, you know, so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, and again, God, I could do a whole show just on this because I think it's fascinating. But I want to ask you though, do you have to be in person or do you do it virtually as well?
No, I can do it virtually. I don't
There
even
works
have to
everywhere.
have, yeah, and I don't even have to have the person there at all if they don't want to be. So, um, if I'm cord cutting, I prefer to have the person with me in
Mhm.
some form, whether it's online or in person. But because it's all energetics, it's just, you know, it's like I help people understand like Reiki, right? Because people do distance Reiki, and that's a bit more accepted now. It's the same thing. You're playing with an energy body, and as long as you have permission, you can connect. So that's the biggest thing too. Like I always make sure I have permission.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
huge. Let's talk about trees for just a minute.
Yeah.
You got me
I'm a
hooked.
tree.
What do you think trees could teach us about our own journeys, and how do you bring that into your work, and how did you even find that out?
So trees is a funny story. So I always felt this pull to nature. Like even when I was younger, like I'd watch Pocahontas and be like, I want to be like Pocahontas and talk to Mother Willow and nature. And then you know, my mom was kind of God love her, but she's like, oh, you know, do you know what really happened to Pocahontas? You know, just smashing my little childhood
Right,
dreams
right,
here of
right.
being this person running barefoot through nature. And it was only when I started to really connect back in, and my spiritual mentor, she's like, you know, you can talk to trees, right? And I was like, huh, maybe I can. Anyway, and then as I unpacked, I have like a tree that's actually like this cool, like spirit tree that's kind of like a guide. And I felt always pulled to trees. And when we moved down to where we live at the moment, it was my birthday, and we only lived here a few months. And my husband took my son out for so I could just be by myself and go meditate in the bush, because I was like, great, thank you. And the elders of the land kind of just pulled me in and like, come, you know, come with this. And they took me to this tree, and I call it the heart tree. And um, mind you, my guides are really fun, like to play with me, because they took me, like, I just went through this really crazy route, and I was like covered in branches and leaves through my hair. Anyway, so then I sat through this ceremony, which was beautiful, and they initiated me into part of the land. And then my guide's like, oh, here you go. Here's the way out. And it was this straight path with like, it was like a track. It was so clear. And I was like, okay, but that's just what they do. But as part of that, I'd already started working with trees and trying to figure out a way how to teach it to children as well, and connecting in, because I was started running nature camps with kids. So getting kids to come out into nature and to connect. And um, through that, my spiritual mentor came out, and we were connecting with these different trees. And when you connect with the trees, essentially you have to connect with the roots, because the roots are is what the energy goes into Mother Earth and connects into those ley lines, so those energy lines that run through our planet. And the roots have all the wisdom, but it's not for everybody. Trees are like us. They permit certain people to come into their energy and not other people. And what they share with you will be dependent on your energy as well. So when we were both connecting with these trees, for me, I might have felt it in my heart or my third eye. And then my mentor, Carly, she might have felt it in her solar plexus or her lower chakras, depending on what it needed. But the funny thing was, that proved that we were both getting similar message was we found this child tree. So it was like this really playful child energy. It kind of hides from you, like you can't always see it because it makes its energy small and big, like a kid playing hide and seek. Anyway, and we both connected with that and we were writing, and I said, oh, I wonder what its name is, because trees often have names. And they'll give us like the names we can pronounce too, because their spiritual names are so many, syllables, you just can't get it out. Anyway, and I said, oh, it's like Immy something. And at the same time, she said Timmy. And I was like, yeah, it's Timmy. So we both at the exact same time said this, and we're like, great, we're not crazy.
Oh my God. That's fun.
Yeah. And then from there, the tree started to share like these stories and this wisdom. And, if you put your back against a tree, it will clear your chakras and clear your energy. But if you want to connect with the tree, obviously you have to ask permission, and you put your hands on the roots. And for me, when I connect with the tree, I will get like kind of tree's life in, like the slow motion document, like
Mhm.
in the documentaries where they speed it up. That's what I see. So I see the tree's life from the moment it was a seed all the way to where it is now. And then I'll get a message, or I'll get a feeling, or I'll get some wisdom come through. So it might be, like you need to work on this. And so the tree where I was taking with the elders, and I call it the heart tree, it's because it would show you the fear that was blocking you and blocking you from sharing your heart. And it was different for everyone. And some people would go, oh my goodness, like, I can't even. And then I was like, yeah, but that's what you're most scared of. And they're like, no, I am. That's true. That's the fear. And then for me, I was like, oh, yeah, fair enough. That's a fear. I'll sit with that. I'm just at that point in my life where I'm like, yeah, we'll just keep going.
And so those of us here in the United States have to travel all the way around the world to go visit
Mm.
the heart tree.
No, you don't. Well, this is the magic.
Yeah.
So because all the trees are connected on ley lines,
Yeah.
you'll have a similar tree in your area that can tap into that energy as well. And the tree that you normally feel most pulled to will have a message that is exact for you. And that's where this book came from. I was sharing that with you before we
Yeah.
got onto this
Yeah.
interview. So I got told I was going to write a book about trees. So this book is called Tree Whispers, which I thought, that's really fitting. And the first part of the book was all about healing. And then I thought, oh, great, this will be a really quick book, no worries, all done. And then I was talking to a friend, and she posted this picture, and I said, oh, those trees have a story. And she's like, can you tell me? And I was like, can I? I can. So I channeled through from this photo this beautiful message for her with, and it was so pertinent to what was happening in her life. And then I got this idea, and I'm like, what if I got other people to share their trees with me, and I can channel through the stories, and I'll put it in the second part of my book. So all of a sudden I'm getting these trees. I have like a community I know in Malaysia from my coaching. So they were sending me trees. I was getting trees from the US and getting trees from all over Australia. And it's still an ongoing project. And it became into this big evolving thing. But the biggest thing was whatever message came through was always so perfect for that person that I'd always get a thing back saying, how did you know? I was
And
like,
it's just a picture. It's just a
it's
picture. They send
just
you
a
pictures.
picture. It's just a photo. Yeah.
No, now
Yeah.
just trees or plants?
I'm mainly doing trees for this book, but I could probably do it with plants as
Wow.
well. So
I think you might be the only person in the world that I can say. I mean, I don't know, right? I've never heard of it before, but listen, I think it's fascinating. I remember there was a medium here in the United States, and she's been dead a while, and her name was Sylvia Brown. And I remember people talking about being vegetarian or vegan. They didn't want to eat meat and, hurt the animals and all this other stuff. And she said, listen, the animals that, no, the plants scream when you cut them. So, I mean,
it's so funny you say that, because we had to cut back some of the gum trees from to help with the bushfire maintenance and
Mhm.
everything. And they were also getting huge, and we're like, we can't have that many gum trees close together. It'll be a inferno.
It's a gum tree.
And
Is that what it is? A
gum
gum?
trees, eucalyptus trees,
Oh,
gum
okay.
trees, we
Yeah,
call
yeah,
them
yeah.
gum trees. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
And my son ran out and he's like, stop cutting their branches. They're screaming. And we're like, and so then I'm there like, going, we're not cutting you down, you know. And it was funny because where we live, we have this extra blocks of land, and this arborist pulled up and they parked right in front of our land, like on the land. And the trees were like, what's going on? And I was like, it's not for you. It's not for you. And they're like, you can't cut us down. I'm like, I know it's not for you. It's not for you. It was for across the road. And then my son was so sad because he's like, you know, Mum, they're cutting the trees. I said, we can't do anything. Like, it's not our property. You know, we can't, you know, we don't know if the trees are sick. So then we actually had to go to a nursery and buy trees to plant extra trees because he was so worried about these trees being taken. And he was actually like, didn't want to go to school and all this stuff. It was quite traumatic for him, especially because of how connected we are with the land. And it's funny with when you were saying the plants screaming, because it's even with animals or anything, as long as you honor them the right way and, you know, do it in a respectful way. Like, I think we have a lot to learn from, you know, you hear the practices with the American Indians when they take like a buffalo, and how they honor every part of it and they eat and use every part of it, but they only take what they need.
Mhm.
That's something we need to keep in mind too. And it's the same, you know, with you know, the plants screaming. Once they knew that, oh, you're just like you're just doing this to help maintain us. Okay, that's fine then. And sometimes some plants will be like, hey, can you actually take this other plant away because it's taking my life force? You know, so they're the weird conversations I have when I do gardening, you know. And
Yeah, I think we need to have you back just to talk about this. I'm telling you, we need to have like a little Catherine mini series going on here with
sure.
I mean, honestly, I think it's fascinating. We still haven't even talked about the books, and we don't have a lot of time left. So I do want to have you back to talk about those in more detail. But can you share just a little bit about what's happening with your books and how
Oh,
you get the information? Because I think this is fascinating too.
yeah. So um I channel all my books, so I never know what I'm writing till it comes through. So I've written a whole novel which I'm currently just getting ready to publish now, and it was like a 90,000 word novel, and I had no idea what I was writing till I was typing it. So I'm reading the book as I'm typing it, going, what happened? What did they do? And it's nothing that I'd ever write about. So I was telling you as well, I've just started another novel like this, and it's about a cult. And I'm like, I don't have any
Cult?
experience in a cult,
Oh my
you
God.
know? And I'm like, okay, all right, righty then. And it was so funny because then shortly after that, I'd met someone that had been in a cult, and everything she was describing, what was like the feelings were like what I was writing about. So I was like, well, thank you, spirit writer. But then I've also got the nonfiction side. So I've just finished, I've just got back, I'm doing the next round of edits now, a book on spiritual ethics, which is called Pillars for Life. And all these were
Hmm.
channeled through, yeah. And these were channeled through to me about like a guide for practitioners who are working as light workers, mediums, psychics, Reiki,
Yeah.
whatever form you want to be. So that's come through too. Um, and yeah, and so normally I'll get like a dream, and then as I wake up with the dream, I'll get the clear points, which I write down because obviously I
Yeah.
can't do them all at once.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, when I start writing, it just comes through. So it's really amazing way to write. And I have no expectations on myself. I just trust whatever comes through. So I'm detached from the outcome, which is always a nice thing. If anyone knows when you're trying to create things, it's really nice to be detached from that because it's just whatever comes through my fingers when I'm
Fascinating.
typing.
Especially a
Yeah.
novel, because a novel has to
Yes.
have some kind of continuity and there's ending and there's, whatever it is. I think it's incredible. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know. I mean, I just wrote a book. The book just came out in January, but it took me 4 years. I
Yeah.
can't imagine how long it would take me if I had to sit and meditate while I was doing it.
Well,
And
I don't, this is the thing. Like, I've got my point to a point right now. Like, even when I work with clients, like, I'm very blessed. I have claircognizance. So it just comes through. So it's like, I'll just know it and just get the download straight away. And then when I don't need to know it anymore, it's almost like memory dumped, because
Yeah, it's gone.
especially if it, exactly. And because if it's for somebody, it's never for me. I'm just the conduit. So I'm just holding that space while that information comes through, and then it's gone again. So, but yeah, if I had to meditate and get in that zone every time, that would be really time consuming. But it's
Yeah.
not. It's almost like, okay, I'm going to write now. And then it's just like, oh, hello. And like, I almost feel like the spirit writer. I feel like it's a guy. And he's just like, all right, let's go. Just,
Incredible.
yeah.
And I can relate to that because when I do readings, I'll get whatever I get and I'll get a call 2 or 3 days later. Do you remember when you said, but, and I'm, nope, it's gone.
That's why I say, like, to people, do you want to record the session? Like, oh, no, no, no. I said, okay, but just the caveat, I won't remember whatever comes through. Like, you
Yeah.
need to write it down, or, and they're like, oh, and some will still say no, and some will go, no, can you put the recorder on? And then they're so grateful that we did. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I record too because, I can't, I mean, I can't remember. I don't want to remember. I don't want to remember
it's
because I
not
don't
for
ever want to
you.
do something. Well, it isn't. And I don't want to do anything from memory either. Because I have repeat clients that come back.
Yeah, that's it.
Um,
That's it.
is there anything you'd like to share? Any inspiration or anything that we haven't talked about this time around?
I feel that, everyone needs to know they have these gifts within them, whatever way it comes out. And you just have to be curious and follow those nudges. So, if you're not sure, or you're feeling like life isn't fulfilling you, just be curious and see what brings you joy and passion, and just follow that. If you get a nudge, act on the nudge. Intuition's meant to be acted upon, not put in a drawer. That was someone's quote, and I love it. I don't know who it was. Whoever quoted that, thank you very much. But it's definitely something, and the more you learn to trust it, the more your life will start to align and flow for you. And then you'll go, oh, this is what I was missing. So,
Truth.
yeah,
It's the truth. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I really do want to have you back on because
great.
it's been fascinating. It really has. I feel like it could go on forever, but people will get to work and they won't listen to the rest of the podcast. So we have to do it in short bits.
That's it.
Anyway, all of you, thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Catherine today. Her journey of healing, self-discovery, and embracing her true spiritual gifts is such a beautiful reminder that transformation is always possible when we're willing to choose ourselves and step into the life we are meant to live. And if you're feeling inspired by what Catherine shared, I encourage you to visit her website at willowhealing.org. There you'll find amazing resources like free gifts, meditations, coaching packages, and courses, all designed to help you on your path of empowerment. And her website is actually an app, so you can download it, and it makes it easier to stay connected and continue your growth with her incredible offerings. Don't forget to stop by my website, mediumscottallen.com, for more tools to support your spiritual journey. While you're there, please subscribe to the podcast, like this episode, and share it with someone who could benefit from this message. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Keep choosing your own path, keep empowering yourself, and I'll see you next time. Enlighten Life. Thanks so much, everybody.